Note: the following video depicts a specific configuration of the notebook. The same removal and replacement procedures apply to all configurations of the notebook. Before you begin, remove the slate from the docking station. Removal. Place the suction cup in the center of the touchscreen glass and engage it. Starting with the upper left corner, use a heat gun to slowly raise the temperature of the touchscreen glass to 80 degrees Celsius or 176 degrees Fahrenheit to melt the adhesive that secures the touchscreen glass to the display enclosure. Caution: do not overheat the touchscreen glass. Excessive heat can damage the internal components of the slate. Using a non-metallic flat-bladed tool, carefully pry the touchscreen glass away from the display enclosure. Caution: the touchscreen glass is fragile. Use minimal force when separating the touchscreen glass from the display enclosure. Place a spacer between the touchscreen glass and display enclosure. Continue the process of heating, prying, and placing spacers around the entire edge of the touchscreen glass in the following order: top, left, bottom, right. Caution: the touchscreen glass ribbon cable is located in the upper right corner of the touchscreen glass. Take extreme care when releasing this portion of the touchscreen glass adhesive. Using the suction cup handle, carefully rotate the left edge of the touchscreen glass out of the display enclosure. Caution: the touchscreen glass ribbon cable is very short. Do not lift the touchscreen glass away from the display enclosure more than necessary. Carefully rest the touchscreen glass on the handle of the suction cup. Remove the spacers from the display bezel. Remove the 5 3mm P0 Phillips head screws that secure the display panel to the display enclosure. Carefully lift the display panel and slide the tab on the right side of the display panel out of the notch on the display bezel. Place the display panel onto the display enclosure so that you have access to the display panel cable and connector. Peel back the retention tape that secures the display panel cable to the display panel and disconnect the display panel cable from its connector on the display panel. Remove the display panel. Using minimal force, lift the locking bar up on both of the touchscreen glass ZIF connectors and disconnect the touchscreen glass ribbon cable from the system board. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connectors and ribbon cable. Remove the touchscreen glass. Carefully remove the home keyboard from the adhesive and alignment pin on the display bezel. Disconnect the left wireless antenna cable from its connector on the system board. Caution: use care when disconnecting the wireless antenna cable from the system board. Damaged cables or connectors can degrade notebook performance. Peel the metallic tape that secures the left wireless transceiver to the display enclosure. Disconnect the microphone board from its connector on the system board. Using minimal force, lift the locking bar up on the webcam LED board ZIF connector and disconnect the webcam LED board ribbon cable from the system board. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connector and ribbon cable. Remove the 10 3mm P0 Phillips head screws identified with arrows that secure the display bezel to the display enclosure. Carefully pry up on the inside edges of the display bezel from the top, sides, and bottom to disengage it from the display enclosure. Remove the display bezel. Replacement. Important: the display bezel must be replaced every time the touchscreen glass is removed. Before installing a new display bezel, remove the following from the old display bezel and install onto the new display bezel: microphone board, webcam LED board. Place the display bezel into position on the display enclosure. Apply pressure around the outside edges of the display bezel until it snaps onto the display enclosure. Carefully adhere the metallic tape that secures the left wireless antenna transceiver to the display enclosure. Connect the left wireless antenna cable onto its connector on the system board. Caution: use care when connecting the wireless antenna cable to the system board. Damaged cables or connectors can degrade notebook performance. Connect the microphone board cable into its connector on the system board. Insert the webcam LED board ribbon cable into the webcam LED board ZIF connector on the system board, and press the locking bar down to lock the cable into place. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connector and ribbon cable. Place the home keyboard into position on the display bezel. Replace the 10 3mm P0 Phillips head screws identified with arrows that secure the display bezel to the display enclosure. Place the touchscreen in a way that allows you access to the touchscreen glass ribbon cable and connectors. Insert the touchscreen glass ribbon cable into the touchscreen glass ZIF connectors on the system board, and press the locking bars down to lock the cable into place. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connectors and ribbon cable. Carefully rest the touchscreen glass next to the display enclosure. Lift the display panel and place the display panel onto the display enclosure so that you have access to the display panel connector and cable. Connect the display panel cable into its connector on the display panel and replace the retention tape. Rotate the display panel toward the display enclosure and route the display panel cable through the routing channel on the battery. Tow the tab on the right side of the display panel into the notch in the display bezel and place the display panel into position on the display enclosure. Replace the 5 3mm P0 Phillips head screws that secure the display panel to the display enclosure. Use display cleaning wipes to clean the display panel and/or touchscreen glass. Remove the plastic backing from the display panel and/or touchscreen glass. Important: to avoid static, ensure that the ionizer is blowing directly onto the display panel and/or touchscreen glass when the plastic backing is removed. Lift the touchscreen glass and remove the plastic backing from the display bezel. Place the touchscreen glass into position on the display enclosure. Important. Ensure that the touchscreen glass is in place and properly seated. Using a clean 2 kilogram, 4.5 pound hand roller, carefully roll the edges of the touchscreen glass in the following order: top, left, bottom, right. Inspect the edges of the touchscreen glass to ensure it is properly adhered to the display enclosure, and re-roll as necessary.